Hello.
Welcome back. We have a very special surprise today.
Guess who we're interviewing?
Yes, as you noticed, I put The Charm Offensive on my November TBR and finished it, loved it, and then immediately told David to read it, and David loved it as well. And then magically, I reached out to Alison Cochrun on Instagram and kind of mentioned, our channel and what we do, and said, if she'd ever wanted to just chat with us about the book and her process, that we'd love to, and she agreed. She agreed. So today, you get to see our very special interview with Alison Cochrun, who is the author of The Charm Offensive, which is a queer romance that is perfect for fall, winter times, anytime really. And we both loved the book, and we got a chance to talk with Alison about, what it was like to write it, what the response has been, queer representation in romance.
And Taylor Swift.
Because what would any conversation be if you can't really see it? You gotta. There you go. Yes, we're both wearing Taylor Swift merch for this interview, so you'll notice that in the video as well. And yeah, we were just like super excited to talk with Alison, and she's amazing and open and just shared, all sorts of insights and nuggets into her writing process. So, did you enjoy the chat?
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, so we hope that you'll enjoy this. This is our chat with Alison Cochrun, who is the writer of The Charm Offensive, and that starts now. Well, I'm glad you're doing well, and thank you for agreeing to do this. This is like so sweet of you to like.
Oh yeah,
us. So,
of course.
You said you've been teaching for 11 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. ELA the whole time, or?
Yeah, high school English the whole time.
Okay.
So I taught 11 years, last year being the 11th. And then this year I'm on a leave of absence, kind of figuring some things out.
Yeah, well, understandably. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had a giant book come out this year, so that's like a huge deal too, I'm sure.
Yeah. And just last year, as I'm sure you are both very aware, was a nightmare year. And so writing full-time and teaching full-time was not a thing that really worked for my mental health. So I was like, all right, I got to figure something else out. Let's try something different and see how it goes.
Well, good. I'm glad that you're doing that and like advocating for yourself. That's really hard to do as a teacher. Like we
yeah. Mm-hmm.
All of that time advocating for those kids and like for our, our coworkers, and it's really hard to find the time to like, work on ourselves. So that's really great that you're doing that. Did that come into the process of you writing the book a little bit? Like when you were reevaluating kind of where you were at that moment and you started writing the book, where you're like, if I'm gonna talk about these two characters who are really like struggling with something and going through something, did you bring any of that into the writing process at all, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like at the time that I wrote the first draft of this book, I was not in therapy. So I was very much like rocking it like Dave, like not taking care of my anxiety and depression. I was like, I'm actually fine. I don't need anything. Like I just work 70 hours a week as a teacher, and then I don't have time to feel things. It's totally great. And so, yes, I like wrote the book and I was like, I should probably get in therapy myself. Yeah. Like that was part of his character arc. So I think that's probably a good indication that like that is also a place that I'm in.
Yeah.
And so because of the book, then I finally found a therapist, and yeah.
That's great. And I assume that like that process is going to lead you somewhere really awesome, because you're going to be able to like investigate your own, personality and who you are and how you respond to the world, and like it's only going to make things better all around you. So congratulations on doing that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it also helped me come out. Like I found after a long process of some like very not great therapists, I found a queer affirming therapist, and that has been really life-saving. So
Allison, I was talking to Craig a few weeks ago about because he shared your book with me. I'm not really a big romance person, but this really got me, I'll tell you that. But I was thinking back when I was first coming out as a teenager, and how crucial this book would have been for me. Because I was thinking what queer books were out like in the early or the mid 80s and the late 90s, that I could kind of gravitate to. And there were some, but they were more connecting to people's trauma more than anything, or they were coming out stories. So I just thank you for this, because this is a really I'm almost jealous in a way, because I'm thinking about teenagers now finding this book and just thinking, I'm like, wow, I wish we had something like this when I was growing up, because I would have really, really, really connected to this as a teenager. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, that's so good to hear. I know, I think that all the time. This is my like queer YA section of my bookshelf. And
also
just there are,
that's great.
yeah, I know, it looks really nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I was like pretty proud of myself. Yeah, and I think all the time, like, I wish I'd had access to those books when I was a teenager. But then for me, like in my mid-20s, that reading queer YA stories is what helped me figure myself out. And so I am still really grateful that those exist.
When we were talking about, because I think a few months ago read Surrender Your Sons, which was a queer, have you read that one?
No, because it's horror, right? And I'm a big coward.
Yeah, it's horror-ish. It's like horror adjacent. It's more like thriller than it is anything else.
Okay.
But I was like, we were talking about it, and I was like, if I was 15 years old and I had picked up this book, I would have like instantly seen myself, instantly been like, yes, I can affirm who I am based on what I'm seeing. So like the fact that this exists, that your book exists, that these other books exist. Like I have a freshman student in one of my theater classes. She walked in the first day with a copy of Red, White, and Royal Blue. And I was like, you shouldn't be reading that. Like you're a little too young for that book, but I'm glad that you're reading it. And she's like, I can't believe that this book exists. I'm so excited. I'm like, when you're older, tell me, and I have another book for you to read. So I'm glad.
I always feel that way when I see, like, I had freshmen reading that book as well. And like, I have a step sibling who is 14 now. And my parents like gave her my book. And I was like, are we sure about this? They were like, listen, like she watches Euphoria, like the stuff that she sees on television, like teenagers these days have access to literally everything. And so, yeah.
Well, and when I picked it up, I had seen it on a couple of other like YouTube channels, and people were starting to talk about it, and I got super excited about it. So I grabbed it, and I was like, I've read a few queer romances, and like nothing has been, like straight here. Nothing's hit me here instantly. And this one, yours really, really did. Like, because I fell in love with both of these people so quickly and so early on. And then watching their romance blossom and watching the world that they kind of create for themselves was really, really heartwarming, and like just made me feel like, oh, this is like perfect. This is a perfect little story for me. Although it's clearly that for a lot of people too. So it's not just me, but where did the Dev and Charlie of it all kind of come from?
Like as characters?
Yeah.
Well, so like the story of me writing this book is like, I'm a teacher, and it was the last week of school. I mostly that year taught seniors. And so my seniors were all gone. They'd already like graduated. And I was cleaning out my classroom, and for some inexplicable reason, it's like Hannah B's season of The Bachelorette. And I started thinking about like, what would happen if someone like me went on a show like The Bachelor? And then I like immediately just was like, ha ha ha, that never happened. Like, I'm like closeted and like figuring out my sexuality. Like we don't see queer stories on these shows. Like I, have all these mental health things, like, and that's often stigmatized in reality television. And so I kind of, was just thinking about that as I cleaned out my file cabinets. And for some reason, the idea kept coming back to me, and I was like, well, what would happen if someone like me went on one of these shows? And like, under what circumstances, like, might we see a character like me? And then Charlie just kind of came out of that. Like, and I was like, that's, here's a justification for why he would be on the show. And then I just, immediately started writing it. And the first draft came really, really fast. I wrote it in like 6 days. And so it just kind of like poured out of me.
Well, and that's amazing too, because it's like both Dev and Charlie feel like such fully realized human beings in every way, because like what you said is the neurodivergent, the mental health stuff that we're talking about with Charlie and with Dev, you don't see on reality television, or if you do, it's exploited. And it's not used to make them more human. And so like to instantly be dropped into a story where you feel like this is a fully realized human being, and there are aspects of this human being that I see in me. And I was just kind of blown away by that. I was like, I can't believe that from the jump that these two people are like so fully formed basically in my mind, and I was able to kind of go with the ride. So I think that you did a phenomenal job with that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So you said you wrote the first draft in 6 days after school was over. So you weren't really balancing the whole like teaching and writing at the same time.
So I started writing it on the second to last day of school. Those were half days, right? So I started writing it. It's like a Thursday. And then, I wrote that Thursday and Friday. I had a weekend to write and got a bunch of writing done. And then I started a grad school class the next Monday. And it was like a 3-hour seminar. And I feel so bad because I did not pay attention at all. I just sat there and like wrote, because it was like a weird virtual class, like pre-pandemic, where I was the only person in a conference room, like watching a class in a different city. And so it was like, literally like they had class and I just was like, I gotta write this. I gotta get it out of me. So yeah.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me the most is because I don't typically read acknowledgments before I read the actual book. I like obviously wait till the end because that's why they're at the end. But the very last thing that you said in the acknowledgments, which was to your students, like I had to put the book down for a minute and be like, because I got like super worked up and emotional because I feel the same way. I feel obviously I've not created something like this for us, for students, but like the fact that you were encouraging them even from afar and you were telling them about how valid they were and how important they were, I was just like, this is an amazing person, first of all, who wrote this, and probably an amazing teacher from what I can gather. Did any of your students reach out to you afterwards? Has anybody read the book or talked to you about it?
Yes. And so it was really hard, like with writing this book as a teacher, I had a lot of just like, it's not for teenagers. Like obviously teenagers read it. And like, that's, I think again, as we talked about, like access to queer stories is really important. So I'm glad that teenagers read it too. But it was hard for me to think about my students reading the book. Because it's such a deeply personal book. Like I tried to like disguise it where I'm like, he's a tech genius with abs. That's not me, but like it is. And so I'm like a little bit freaked out about being that vulnerable, like in the world, especially with my students. But a lot of former students who are now adults have reached out about reading it. And that has meant a lot to me. I also like I came out, I was out publicly about 1.5 years ago. And so many former students reached out to like come out to me. And so many students have come out to me like since, the book came out. And that has been a pretty cool experience. So
I can only imagine that like, I have a few students who have reached out to me post-graduation because I've only been teaching high school for 3 years. I did middle school and elementary before that. So like, I've only had a handful of students reach out, but like the fact that they were able to see someone visible in a responsible role, even if they weren't comfortable coming out yet, like that means so much to them. Like just to have have you there. I'm the only out male teacher at my school, and I have a lot of students who I don't have in class at all, or who I don't work with in shows, who just come up to me and ask advice or just want to, talk or be seen. And so the fact that, we can provide that for them, I think means more to them than anything we could teach them in the classroom. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
I had questions because when I talk to my students, or if I talk to any other booktubers online, there's this idea that, okay, you write the book, you find a publisher, you get it published, and then that's it. Can you talk about the hustle that kind of happens after the book is published for the author?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was one of those people where I was like, the hardest part is going to be just like finding somebody to publish it, right? And like, or the hard, first you have to get an agent, and so that was hard. And then I was like, okay, I've done that. Like things are just going to get easier, and they just get harder and harder in terms of like things that you have to do in order to sell a book. And so I think one of the really interesting aspects of figuring this all out, like over the course of the last 2 years, is realizing that writing is a part of your job, but it is definitely not your whole job when you're an author. And because I'm a teacher, I had never been on social media before. I mean, I had a Facebook because like it was invented the year I started college, back when it was like college only. But otherwise, like I never was on Instagram or Twitter. Like I've never posted anything even to Facebook because as a teacher, it was too muddy for me. And I just wasn't sure how to exist in that space. I started teaching when I was 22. And so that was such a hard thing for me to figure out is I was like, okay, my book deal has been announced. I now have to get an Instagram and I have to learn how to do this. And as someone with like pretty severe social anxiety, that was an experience. Yeah. And so I think there's definitely, in order to help like your book be successful so you can write more books, there's a lot more to writing than just the writing aspect.
Was that grind after the publishing and after the like the eventual, when you picked the cover and all that stuff was done and you knew it was going to come out, like was that grind really exhausting for you, or was it something that you really like found enjoyment in?
It was a mix. Sometimes it was enjoyable. I mean, unfortunately, the way that my brain works, it often makes things that should be really fun, like a little bit more stressful. But I think the hardest and most stressful part was really when I first had to get on social media. Like that was really difficult for me because that was not a natural part of my personality, and so that was really tough. But then it was like the 2 weeks or so leading up to pub, and then like the 2 weeks after, I think, where that was like the month window that was the busiest. And thankfully I had made the decision because my book came out September 7th, and I was like, how am I going to launch a book the first week of school? Like I just can't. I can't imagine doing that. Like I don't think that would be healthy for me. I don't think I would be like doing a service to my students. And so that kind of factored into me taking a leave of absence. And so it was easier because for that month, I could just say like, this is your whole job. Like you just have to do all of these things. And most of them were actually pretty fun. So it was okay. But yeah, when I was trying to do stuff while teaching, it would be like, I got an email with the covers, like from my editor. And I was in the middle of a PLC meeting with my team, and I like was leading the meeting, and I was like freaking out. I was like, why did I check this email in the middle of this meeting? And then of course, like had to admit, I was like, y'all, I'm so distracted. I can't even remotely focus because all I'm thinking about is what my cover is going to look like. And so that was really tough.
Well, I can imagine. Yeah. Like having to worry about this thing that has been essentially your baby, and like it coming out into the world, and then also having to deal with the work stuff on top of that. Like that would just seem like almost too much for anyone to actually be able to, physically be able to handle. So
yeah. And it's hard because so many writers do it. I mean, most writers have a full-time job. Writing is like a side job that they do. And so I'm so impressed by that. But it was really difficult for me to be able to say, like, I can't. Teaching and writing are not two things I can like do. Especially teaching, where I feel like I like want to do my absolute best for my students. And I was like, I can't be my best self. And I can't give that much to them and then have anything left to do at home for writing. So
yeah. This is kind of weirdly unrelated, but like something that just kind of popped into my brain. We talk about like what the best thing that we get to teach students, or that we get to impart to students. What is the thing that you've held on to for the last 11 years that like your students have taught you, or something that like has resonated with you?
That they have taught me? Oh my gosh. Well, I think you know, it's definitely maybe the opposite of your experience, but because I've only been out for about 2 years, being able to watch a lot of my students come out and share their coming out experiences with me, I think really impacted it. Like, you know, at the time I was like, I am an ally. Like I have, you know, and like, I really care about LGBTQ issues. My students know that. That's why so many of them come to me and share these stories with me. And I'm able to connect with them in this way. But I think seeing that and hearing their stories really helped me eventually get to a place where I could be honest with myself. So
Yeah, watching them be brave in front of us can only bolster our bravery, I think, as adults, even too, like figuring it out. So
yeah, and I think too, you know, it's sort of like the hypocrisy of when I wrote the book and I wasn't in therapy. There's that element of, you know, you're sitting with kids and you're saying, you know, you're telling them all these things and like validating, like being authentic and you know, all of these, you know, things that I truly believed, but also was not doing. And I think that had really, being that role model had a big impact on me realizing what I needed to do in my own life.
yeah, yeah. Shifting gears slightly, because you are writing your next book, or you're in the
Yes.
process of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of David's favorite questions to ask is like, what is like the perfect writing day for you? What does that look like for you?
Ooh, I love that question. The perfect writing day for me is one where I like definitely start writing like promptly by 6 a.m. Like even a little bit before would be great. So I love writing in the morning. And my perfect writing day is a drafting day, not a revision day, because revision is hard. And drafting is very satisfying because you just get to look at word count. And the perfect day would be like, I wrote, you know, 2,000 words by 8 a.m. That always makes me feel very accomplished. And then I don't know, writing until like 1 or 2 and feeling really like getting really caught up in it and caught up in the story, being able to write until I literally can't because of like, I don't want to sit in a chair anymore, not because my brain is done. You know, when I'm really excited to return to it the next day.
Your body's like, excuse me.
You should probably exercise. You should probably like take your dog to the dog park. He's sad.
That's when the watch says it's time to stand up. You've been sitting here too long. I'm like,
Yes.
I'm working, leave me alone.
Yeah. So that's the perfect writing day where I don't really want to stop, but I know I have to. And then it makes me excited to come back to it the next day.
What is your relationship like with your editor?
I love my editor so much. I'm so grateful to work with her. I think in terms of the dynamics, so like we're working on my second book right now. She bought my second book on option, which means I only had to write like 100 pages of it. And then I wrote a full synopsis. And so she kind of bought more the idea of the book than like an actual book itself, which is common with like a second book or like later when you're more established. And so then we had like an initial meeting based on the first 100 words and what was working and what wasn't and kind of where we saw it going. So that I made a bunch of changes to kind of the plot structure based on that feedback and wrote the book. And then turned it into her. It wasn't due until like mid-September or October 1st, I think was my deadline. And so I had a lot of time to write the book, which was good because I was also doing publicity for Charm the whole time. So it took a really long time to write book 2. And then I turned that into her and she gets it back to me with an edit letter, which this time was an 8-page document, which was it was a lot. And my friend, like I have a good writing friend where we were on the exact same timeline for our second book. And his edit letter was like 1.5 pages. And I was like, oh, Tim, mine was 8 pages, which is great. Like, because, you know, I obviously want the work to be the best that it can be. And she just has such a good ability to see what needs to be changed and kind of where characters need to be fleshed out and, you know, all of that great stuff. But yeah. And so then she gives me a bunch of feedback and then I'm doing developmental edits right now. And then I'll turn it back into her and we'll move on to line edits. But I feel really, really lucky because one, I like a lot of feedback. So it's good. Like it's hard to see 8 pages, but it's good because I think I want the story to become its best self. but I also am really lucky because I never disagree with her feedback. So I think it's just a really good fit in terms of everything she says to me. I'm always like, oh, Caitlin's right. Like, I need to fix this. Caitlin's right. I don't need the side plot. I have to cut the side plot. You know, I always have like way too many characters, way too many side plots in the beginning. And she always helps me kind of like bring it down to its essential story.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I'm teaching creative writing right now.
Awesome.
Most days.
Okay.
Just getting them to write has been really like just to sit down in class. I don't love giving homework. And so I'm like, listen, I'm going to give class time to do this. Use the hour and a half to 45 minutes that we have and just write. I was like, don't look at, don't go back and edit anything. Don't go back and like fix anything. Just put words out on the page and just getting them to write. But then once they've done that, you were talking about the relationship with your editor, and it's like getting them to look at changes and look at comments and look at feedback is really difficult, because they think it's instantly a personal attack on their idea or what they came up with. And so like, did you have any like struggle moments at first with edits, like where you felt like you were holding on to something too tightly and like you couldn't let it go? Or
Definitely. And I also am just like a hypersensitive person. And so rejection is really difficult for me. And so like I have been writing my whole life, but this is, the first book that I've had published. And a lot of that is because I was just terrified letting anybody see my writing, and was so afraid of that impending rejection or failure. And so that was really difficult for me. And I had a hard time like looking. I think the first time I got feedback from my agent, because we did a revision together before we went on submission, I like couldn't read it right away. Like I saw the email and I had like immediate panic, and I was like, oh, I can't open this email. I know it's good, and I was so nervous, and it took me a little bit of time to like work up to it. And now I'm finally in a place where like, if I get feedback, I can immediately open it and start looking at it. But it took me a while to get there. And it took me a while to separate myself and my own worth from feedback. And I think, that's just like a natural part of the writing process. But I taught creative writing 1 year at my high school, and I had the same experience. Like students, they had such a hard time writing. I'd be like, right now. And they'd be like, I don't feel like it now. I want to be like, okay, but like, you got to be able to do it. Like as a writer, you have to be able to like develop a sustainable habit. And then when they finally did write, I would be like, what if we, I try to help them with revision, and they just would turn the same thing back into me. And I'd be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know how to help you see that like nobody writes a perfect draft the first time. That's just like not a thing. No, right. I mean, I don't know, maybe like incredible writers, like geniuses, like it just pours out and it's perfect. But I think that's a really hard thing with young writers, is getting them to recognize that like drafting is just one part of the process.
Yeah.
And revision is, I spend way more time revising than I do drafting.
We read a lot. I had them read the first chapter of Bird by Bird, which meant a lot to me in college. And then because we were talking about the shitty first draft and what that means, and like to get it all out on the page and what that means. And I was like, I think intellectually they get it, but like the actual practice of taking that intellectual idea and like moving it into your fingers while they're writing, it's like I've yet to figure out as a teacher how to bridge that chasm between those two things right now. Because I like most of them want to write, but they just don't want to do it when I'm giving them the time to do it. That's the challenge, you know what I mean?
And I think that's a challenge for adults too. The like letting the bad draft happen. Like I'm doing sort of a NaNoWriMo, so like National Novel Writing Month. And, I've been like talking to other people who are doing it on social media, and like so many people are like, I can't let the first draft be bad. Like I can't let go of that control. It has to be perfect. Or I'll say like, I could write a draft of a book, in 6 days. That was a fluke. Like that will never happen again. But like I wrote that first draft in 6 days. I spent like a year and a half deeply revising it. And what it looked like those first 6 days is not what it looks like now.
Right.
And I think so many people are like, oh, I could save myself so much time if I just do it perfectly the first time. And I'm like, but you're not going to.
Yeah.
It will never happen because it's so hard to write a story perfectly the first time.
And you just get so bogged down in like the fixing things as you go that like your progress gets so stunted because you're always going back and like trying to perfect something that it'd be more easily done if you just got it all out and went back to it, you know?
Yeah.
Speaking of your second book, I was listening to your playlist yesterday that you posted about with your inspiration playlist.
Yes.
Does that come into is that a factor for you when you're writing? Is that something that like motivates you or inspires you, or how do you use that like as you're going?
Yeah. So like that specific playlist, a lot of the songs on there are like directly referenced in the book. So like some of them are really weird, right? Like the Celine Dion song and like
That's not weird.
yeah. So like that's because like that is a scene. And like every time I go back, like I get to that scene, I have to like put that song on repeat and like have it in the background to like drop me into that moment. And so I do that like not with every scene. But with a lot of scenes, I'll be like, okay, like this is the song that like is playing. This is the song that they're talking about. Like this is the song that's referenced. Like I'm going to listen to it as I'm writing. But yeah, it's also just like, I just had fun, like thinking about different scenes and different characters and like, you know, where certain Evermore songs would go within the chronology of the book. So I was like, this is how I will structure it. I can listen to music like half of the time when I'm writing. If it's really like requires my full brain, I sometimes can't listen to music. So
Yeah, I just imagine that it starts to, when I'm writing, especially, it like starts to warm its way in, and then like I'll go back and read it, and there's like lyrics that like weird words that I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why? Because it's a lyric song. That playlist specifically, like obviously it's Christmas. It's Christmas referential in a way, not maybe directly, but it's great. And you talked about, I watched another interview where you talked about the kind of germination of the second novel, which is like a sapphic Christmas romance. Like,
yes,
yeah,
Perfect.
yeah,
Perfect. Perfect.
I'm really excited.
yeah. Well, we love Hallmark movies. So when you described it as like a Hallmark movie, but where ladies fall in love, I was like, you sold me. That's the log line. I didn't need anything.
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah. Has that process been, I mean, I know you said the editing process and the working with your editor has been a little bit like different and maybe more like, did that second novel just like did the idea come right out, or?
Oh my gosh, no. The second book is the exact opposite of the first book. The first book, I had the idea on a Wednesday, started writing it on a Thursday. It came out in 6 days, right? And so much of it like just walked out of my brain, right? It was like just there, what I wanted to say, and who these characters were. And then my second book, I had the idea like July of 2020. And the idea was like, I wanted to do like a gay while you were sleeping. Because I love that movie. And so that is what it started as. And like it started as a gay while you were sleeping, like there was a coma involved. Like it was a completely different book. And I kept trying to make like gay while you were sleeping work. And everybody kept telling me like, listen, that movie's kind of messed up. Like it's a really hard, like without Sandra Bullock's charm, that's a hard sell.
Yeah.
And so that was tricky. And so it evolved a million times. And like really the only like while you were sleeping aspect of it is that like she is in a fake relationship with this man and like is in love with his sister, who like is heavily inspired in my brain by Bill Pullman in While You Were Sleeping, because like he just looks like a Portland lesbian in that movie. Right? Like it's literally he wears like the khaki jacket over a flannel, like into his like loose fitting jeans, the whole
He works
movie.
with furniture.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
So he is my like inspo for the love interest, but otherwise the book has changed completely.
Yeah. When you're talking about those inspirations, those things that like we grew up with that have continued to inspire us even as adults, what were the things, the books and the authors and the media that like inspired you as you were growing up, and the things that like, you know, have stuck with you even as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, I was obsessed with just romance, just like obsessed with it. Like I loved love stories like my whole childhood. So it started like Disney movies, you know, especially like Beauty and the Beast was my absolute favorite. But I liked anything with a love story in it as a kid. And then when I got into reading, it was like a lot of like Meg Cabot, I remember just like being obsessed with as like a middle schooler. And then, you know, lots of like YA fantasy, angsty, like love triangle teen books. But I think all of those were super influential in my life because like they were all very straight. And so, you know, and I talk about this in the book that like that really had a big influence on how I viewed what a love story was and like how I internalized like ideas about like as a woman, especially as like a, you know, feminine presenting woman, like there must be a man. Like I just haven't found him yet. And so the ways in which that kind of shaped my understanding of love and romance, you know, in that sense, in kind of a negative way, but also really instilled like this love of love stories and really made me want to write different kinds of love stories.
Yeah, and I think even like reality TV as well, hardly any kind of representation like in the early 2000s, even kind of now, unless it's exploited in some way or it's made for, you know, fodder or, you know, something that we can poke fun at, which is why I kind of, you know, I read this book and I'm like, well, where is our ever after? You know, because then I was thinking like in the early 2000s, we had shows like Next on MTV.
Yes.
Okay. Or like, what was there was a gay one on Bravo.
Oh,
I think it's called Prince Charming, maybe.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So there was that, but it was more, I don't know, it was like made to be laughed at.
Yeah.
Instead. So yeah, I was jealous of at the very end of this book. So that's kind of like what I want to see. Are you a reality TV show fan?
Unfortunately, yes, I am. Yeah, I mean, like I wrote this book because I watched The Bachelor, like, and The Bachelorette, and like anything as part of that whole mess up franchise. Like I keep coming back and consuming it, and so that was a big part of like, I mean, in that particular franchise, queerness is literally non-existent. Like it is so, the heteronormativity of that show is so deeply entrenched. Like there is no consideration of anything that is not like allo cis het. And so that show is like in a different time period. Like I don't know how they managed to like travel back in time every time they film a season of that show. And I don't know why I watch it, but that is why I wrote it. If you're looking for a show with like a reality dating show with queer representation, HBO Max's 12 Dates of Christmas. I don't know if you watch that, but it's like, it's definitely not meant to be laughed. Like there's no, it's just very like deeply queer. And so they always have 3 leads, and this season 2 of them are gay. And yeah, it's
I
like
the trailer for that last year, and I was like, oh, we need to watch this. And then there's there's just so much content we never got.
There's so much, yeah.
But now I think we probably will sit down and watch it, especially given our affection for the book.
Yeah, and so it's nice. It's nice to see it. It's not the same. It's not the same though for me. What I love about The Bachelor is that they're really selling you that it's a love story, right? Like it is deeply predicated on the notion that like these people are going to get married. And like that's problematic in its own way, but like it also really like it sells that and you buy into that, and you know, like it's not like the queer season of Are You the One, where you know none of those relationships are going to last. Like you're just there for the fun. But I think like I want that reality dating show that like is queer, but also like tells us that this is real love, like, and kind of buys into that whole myth of like, I don't know. I want that, because I think in so many ways, like The Bachelor is kind of the reality dating show in terms of selling successful relationships. And I would love to see a reality dating show like that.
Well, and a queer reality dating show like that, but where it isn't, not everything is about being queer, where it feels like love, like that would be revolutionary in my mind. Like just to watch it where it's just a dating show, and there's just people who are of all shapes and sizes and wants and desires, and like it doesn't it's not just about being queer, but it's also just about love. Like that would be amazing. But I feel like we'll never get that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 Did you ever watch, unrelated, but did you ever watch Unreal?
Yes, but I had to stop because of my own. So I love that show. That show is amazing. And like Heather Shapiro is, yeah, like she's fantastic. But that show is dark.
Yes.
And goes to some places that for me, there's certain things I can't really watch in my reality or in any television, in my media. And so I had to stop watching after first season.
Did you do any research about like how those things work behind the scenes at all, or?
Yes. Well, so I mean, not for the first draft, because the first draft I just wrote. As a person who had watched The Bachelor a lot, I was like, I know enough to like write this first draft. And then a lot of the research I did honestly was like online research. So the convenient thing about the Bachelor franchise is that like every former contestant has like a podcast or like there's like so much content out there that you can access. And I read every article about like rules for how people like get on the show, like what they bring, all of that kind of stuff. And then I have a friend who's a producer, but in scripted television. And he answered a bunch of my questions for me. And then like half of them I had to be like, okay, but that doesn't work for my fictional plot. So I'm going to ignore that real life thing that happens. And I'm just going to pretend like it's like this.
Gloss over that.
Yeah. I was like, please don't be offended, Skylar. I'm going to change some of these rules, like, because I need this plot to work. And so, yeah, that was a lot of it. And then at the end, I remember watching like actual YouTube videos that for teaching people how to edit reality television, because I had to do those interstitial chapters and kind of like what that looks like.
What do you imagine is the life of this book post, all of this? Like what happens next with the book?
Hopefully people keep reading it. Oh, that would be nice. I hope so. Yeah.
Can I ask you some Taylor Swift questions?
Always.
Okay, good. Do you have a favorite album currently?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. I was like a diehard Red is the best Taylor Swift album for years and years and years. And was like really obsessed. And like now that's been, like reignited with the re-release. But then I listened to every single album, the podcast. They did a great podcast on all of Taylor Swift's albums. And in listening to that podcast, I really fell in love with, again, Speak Now, which is, I think for me, like that is the album that is most the charm offensive in terms of songs and themes. And then I really refell in love with Reputation. Like Reputation actually might be my favorite album. Like as a whole album from beginning to end, I love it. And then Evermore. I love Evermore. I don't know why that one just like really gets me in all my feels. So yeah. So those are my three favorites right now.
I mean, you're speaking his language. Reputation is.
I know. I see the Reputation sweatshirt.
Yes. Well, it's funny because I'm obviously been listening to Red a lot, and I remember when that album came out, and I was like, okay, this is good. I think I'm too old for this at the time, but even being older now and listening to the re-release, I'm like, oh, I missed so much, like so much in this album. And it's so good. And those vault tracks are amazing. Like
they're so good. The vault tracks are so good on this album.
I will listen to the second half of the Taylor's version more than I'll listen to, because I feel like I've heard those other songs a lot. But like the second half, I just have been constantly listening to it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I had Forever Winter on repeat while I was getting ready this morning. So good.
Yeah. Well, and I loved the little Big Town version of Better Man. I like that song a lot. I think I like her version better. Weirdly, I don't know why, but because they're not that different. But like, yeah, I think that song is great. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you had to pick a Taylor Swift song for Dev and one for Charlie, do you have one in mind?
I do, yes. So for Dave, like definitely Love Story from Fearless. Like that, I listened to that song a lot while like drafting and revising this book, because I just feel like that is perfectly, there actually was, and I think one of the very early versions, a scene where that song played, because I just felt like that was perfect. And then in my re-falling in love with Speak Now, Last Kiss is the most heartbreaking song. I love it. It's amazing. And I feel like that song to me embodies like Charlie at the end of the book. And so I like hear that song and get very emotional.
I had to turn off Last Kiss because I was like, this is too like, yeah, it's too much.
It's so much.
Yeah.
It's really like, I've been sleeping on that song for years and years. Like that is such an emotional song.
And for what, she was 18, 19 when she made that album, like,
yeah,
yeah, just kind of blown away.
Yeah, same.
So I'm assuming if you were to battle Folklore and Evermore together, you choose Evermore, right?
I would, and I always feel so like I love Folklore. It's definitely like makes more sense as like an album, right? Like it just feels so cohesive. Whereas like Evermore is all over the place, but I kind of like that about Evermore. And I think that's why it speaks to me is I like that it's just, there's so many different types of songs, and has so much variation. And then Folklore also came out at a time when I was in a depressive episode. So like when it came out, I could not listen to it. I like started listening to it and I was like, oh, this is too much. Like not right now. And so Folklore and me have had a different relationship progression.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. I think you had posted on Instagram that like there's an argument that Evermore is definitely a holiday album, and like fight me on it if it's not, because I agree. I think that it's a Christmas album without being like overtly Christmas. Yeah,
it is. It just like for me, it feels like a Christmas album, and I think she said that it's a fall album, and I'm like, no, it's a winter album. I'm sorry, Taylor. I respect you so much, but you're wrong about this one fact. Evermore is a winter album. It just feels so deeply, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, 'Tis the Damn Season being like one of the best songs on that album. And you can't say that is not like, that is winter. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is a Christmas song. Yes, that is a Christmas song.
It's the best Christmas song. It's because it's not like beating you over the head with like, sleigh bells and all that.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
And there are a couple other songs on that album that just, I don't know, they just feel like the dead of winter when there's just like no like leaves on the trees and it's gray. Just like
the last thing I wanted to ask you is, do you feel like this could have a life as like a television show or a movie or something down the road? Do you feel like that's something that you would like for this to happen with this book? Or
oh my gosh, I would like die if it was a television show. That would be my absolute dream, obviously. Because I am a big, like, I love television and watch a lot of it. And I think again, in talking about representation, like television shows have a broader reach than books, and I love books and wish everybody read books, but like, that's not always the case. And so, yeah, I would love to see it as a television show. That would be amazing.
So like a television show plus a reality show ever after tie-in.
Just both.
Yeah.
Just create this whole reality television show, please.
When we finished reading it, we both were talking about like the Dev and Charlie stuff is perfect, and we love Dev and Charlie, but like the female contestants, I want to see another book or another version of this story that's them and what was happening with them, especially with what happens at the end. I was just like, I want to know more about these people. So I was like, I don't want to like beg you, but I'm just gonna like, I want to see something with them too.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to write more about the female characters like in the book. Obviously, they're very like special to me. I mean, Daphne is like very special to me as a character. So yeah, like I would love to be able to do that.
Well, I will hold the sign for it forever, and I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll keep just returning the idea over and over and over. So
yeah.
Alison, for people that haven't read the book yet, what can they expect from?
I mean, lots of reality television goodness. So lots of behind the scenes drama about reality dating shows. Hopefully they will laugh. I like, hopefully it is funny and they will like enjoy the sense of like humor and escapism. But then also like it is a romantic comedy that deals with a lot of like serious themes regarding mental health and mental illness. So they can also expect that aspect to be like a pretty big part of it.
Well, I mean, I have to thank you because there's very few books that connects both him and I together. Or if it's a book that I'll say, hey, you really need to read this book because I need to talk to you about it. But it's
and then it takes me 6 months to read it.
And it takes about a year. But it was I love that when we find something that we can connect to together, because it just makes that reading experience so much more deeper.
Especially something that reflects, not that obviously this is not our love story, but like that reflects us in a way is really, really nice, you know? We do, so on our channel, we do book report cards as opposed to star ratings because of us both being teachers.
Yeah, of course.
Our wrap up is coming up, but I just wanted to let you know that it's, for me, it's an A+. So
ooh, A+. A+.
100 out of 100 in every aspect. So I really, really loved it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you for doing this with us this morning too. This like seriously means the world. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, of course. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, it was great to meet you. So thank you.
Yeah, it was, good luck with the stretch from now until winter break.
Yeah.
All right. Well, take care.
You too. Thank you so
Alison.
much.
Yeah, of course. Bye.
Bye.
And that was our interview with Alison Cochrun, writer of The Charm Offensive.
We have to reach out and just say as many thanks as we can possibly say to Alison for agreeing to do it, agreeing to chat with us, agreeing to sit down on a Saturday morning pretty early and, you know, just talk to the two of us about her book. So we're very grateful, and we hope that you will, if you haven't, go out and buy the book, support Alison and read the book and love it, hopefully as much as we loved it, and spread the word about the book, because the more people that read it, the better, in my opinion. So. In the description box below, there are some independent bookstores that you can help support by either buying a book of your choice or by purchasing The Charm Offensive and, you know, letting Alison know how much you loved her. I'll put Alison's Instagram below and her website below, so if you'd like to reach out and talk to her, you can do that there. And then check our Instagram for upcoming videos. We have a few. We hit our 300 subscriber mark. So we're going to be doing a Q&A next, and we're also doing our chapter taste test video. So we're going to film those soon too. Are you excited for that? 10 chapters, 10 different books.
We'll see.
It'll be a ride. So thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're notified anytime that we make new videos, and comment below. What did you think of the interview? What did you think of Alison? Have you read The Charm Offensive? Did you enjoy The Charm Offensive as much as I did and as much as David did? And we'll engage with you in the comments there. So we are Self-Possessed. I'm Craig.
And I'm David. Goodbye.